Hi, I'm Grace Lynch. Welcome to another video. This video is going to be titled The Missing Mathematician. Um, Today I'd like to talk about, briefly, um, finding my voice for the experience of having uh, had conditions in my life that I had to find a way through and work out how to integrate personally without a language for them. In many ways, the factors that went into the life leading up to my brain injury and life afterwards were the reason there were no words for them is an accident of history. Um, I was born in 1965. A working public understanding, autism and Asperger's didn't happen until uh, probably around 1990. And even then, it's been another 20, 30 years for there to even be a concept that it could be something that uh, could be diagnosed later in life. There's not been a culture around it. There wasn't a culture around it for most of my life. Similarly, in terms of giftedness, the intersection of giftedness and autism, for most of my life, I had been told that I was gifted. And then when I learned about my autism, publicly, all I could find out in the culture was the intersection about giftedness and autism converging in savantism, which usually implied an extreme gift in one area, but um, less capacity in most other areas. And so, even once I had the pieces, um, the partial descriptions of what I experienced in my life, there was no cultural way to put them together. And as a person enduring brain rehab, one of the challenges in making peace with my own experience is personal integration. And it's very challenging to do that without any kind of social language to step into. It meant I had to invent that. So I've had to struggle to build my own way of doing that. There's not been anything to look to in the outside world. There's not a way of thinking about autism that fits me that I found. There's not a way of PTSD. There's not a way of aphasia. There's not a way of TBI. And if for no other reason than for me, I don't compartmentalize my consciousness. I can't. That's unthinkable for me. So I don't have PTSD, have TBI, have autism, have aphasia, have synesthesia, any more than I'm a little bit male, a little bit white, a little bit older. I'm not partially anything. I'm not a little bit autistic. All of me is all of that. That's how my consciousness works. It's always been that way. So the way that I process myself and everything I've ever learned is the same all the time. Everything I've ever learned, even though the outer trappings and the ways that I participate in the world may be compartmentalized. Like I'll talk math things with math people. I'll talk poetry things with poetry people. Inside, when I do art, when I do math, when I do music, when I do poetry, when I do my budget, when I do the laundry, when I have an argument, when I decide to cycle my internet, I'm doing it exactly the same way. I'm only doing one thing. One of the speculations I had early on is that part of the appearance of giftedness could be, at least for me, is that other people, when they try to get better at something, they've got their life and they've got a thing they're trying to get better at. At least it's my perspective. For me, I've only been doing one thing since birth. Of course, I'm going to get better at it because I'm not practicing anything else. I'm not doing it sometimes, and then this is my life and this is what I do. I do and am the same thing every minute of every day, awake or asleep. I process, I don't understand how not to be that way. What does this have to do with the missing mathematician? One of the most difficult challenges for me going into college, coming out of the military, trying to process everything and build my life as a young person in my early 20s was that by the time I reached college, by the time I reached my young majority, um, I had ways of mastering things to do in the world: writing, mathematics, and music. And so the world encouraged me ways to do those things in relation to the world. The difficulty was that there was no way for me to find a personal language, a personal mode of being the person who could do the things. Because when I was for instance, when I started music early on, I started when I was 3. They put me in piano lessons, and I can still remember. I have the remember sitting there with Mrs. Buckley, and she would have me read these dots and sticks on the page. She would talk about all the structure in music, and that I could understand the structure she was talking about, but it had nothing to do with the music that I experienced because I experienced everything as music all of the time. I didn't have to do music. Everything was music, and I had been born there. I didn't understand why she was trying to get me to some place that was already there. I didn't understand her or my parents or anybody in the recital things. They seemed to want to get to a place in music, and that was incomprehensible to me. So I could do the structure, but I couldn't figure out where they were coming from. Similarly, in language, I could do the rules of it, and then people tell me how grammar works, and so then I would do correct grammar, and then find myself ostracized for being a young person using correct grammar. Um, People would tell me what the rules of the things were, but the way I processed the rules didn't cause me to not be able to understand the people doing them. And finally, in mathematics, the way that I was learning mathematics was what I found was that when I experienced a perfect logical structure, my brain perceived it from the start as a kind of music, a kind of harmonics. I wasn't aware of doing that. I just did it so that a perfect structure, like a process, a problem correctly solved, it has a distinct sound. An incorrect process, I will feel it and hear it long before I recognize the mistake, but it's in a flash. It's instantaneous. And because that way of mathematics was so easy for me, most of my interest in mathematics was how to create new things like that. Um, and I couldn't understand the people involved because they would waste time on these structural elements when that wasn't my interest at all. And of course, I didn't have any language for this. I wouldn't learn until I started studying higher mathematics in the mid and late 80s. I wouldn't learn that I have autism and all these different things until the decade of 2010 to 2020. And so what I found myself exploring in mathematics was at the foundations. How do we know what a word means? A word means what it means. Why do we use a priori notions? Why do we know that something is true from the start? How do we create a word or a term that we can actually trust is what it's supposed to be from every perspective? And so I explored these things, and when I tried to explore them, the questions that I asked were not questions that the math world around me seemed to have a way for. And the more that I progressed in my degree, the less I felt able to bring what I was really interested in into what I was going to study. And I found it impossible to be a thing and do a thing widely separated. I didn't understand that my consciousness, I have to figure out how to have what I do and be who I am doing that from the inside out. It's much later in life, but now I find that the center of my journey of recovery and reintegration after brain rehab is that I have all the pieces, but the challenge is to figure out how I need to be the person I need to be, including all the trauma things, and to be the person who can do the things. And that's something I feel like is a personal journey, and I'm still on it. So I could do the mathematics. I just couldn't be the mathematician who could do the mathematics. That's all. Have a good one.